4th of July is a national day of mourning in England. Actually, they're launching an investigation into Russian meddling in the American War of Independence, because the British, they thought they had it right in the palm of their hand and then they lost it. So they realized there must have been some outside interference going on.
French.
So, so July 28th, let's mark that day on our calendars, the anniversary of the Armada. What I wanted to talk about today was, we've heard many, many times the importance of America and the importance of, why America is so, why is America great? We've heard this many times. That would be another good talk to give. But what I wanted to focus on was a slightly different subject matter in relationship to the importance of America. And that is the importance of freedom, especially the freedom of worship, which is so central to the fundamental tenets of American liberty. So, as you know, by being a member of this church, we've studied divine principle, we've studied biblical history, human history, we've studied about the fall of man, we've studied about restoration. And the fundamental principle behind restoration is the need for us to reconnect with God. We lost our relationship with God, and now we need to reconnect. And so basically the whole of human history is a documentation of the attempts by both God and human beings to work together to restore that parent-child relationship. And fundamentally, that is also the purpose of the Messiah, the true parent of humankind, is to come to the world to show us how to reconnect ourselves with God. The reason why Jesus' words of his generation was so inflammatory and so disruptive was that Jesus came into a world that was dominated by an evil force. And so his words of reconnecting with God were inflammatory to the people of his generation. Similarly, the Lord of the Second Advent comes to a world that's not restored either, not yet, and therefore the Messiah's words have been described, even by Jesus himself, as being like a sword or like a fire, because they hurt, they burn. So our reconnection with God is fundamental, but what do we do, what can we do on an individual level to reconnect ourselves with God? I saw this TV miniseries, John Adams, a few weeks ago, and it was actually very good. It's some good actors in that series, and that gives you the background to the American War of Independence and what happened after from the perspective of John Adams. So that's an interesting one to watch. And then I was struck by the concept of a tunnel. Okay? So you have God on one side of the tunnel and you have human beings on the other side of the tunnel. And they need to bridge this chasm between them. And they need to get it right. Because otherwise you have two tunnels that pass each other. Or you have one side working and the other side not working, and then the tunnel never gets built. So there was a great feat of engineering that took place recently, fairly recently, and that was the tunnel underneath the English Channel. Well, the English call it the English Channel. The French don't call it the English Channel. So here you have these two nations that are like almost polar opposites in their sense of like self-importance. And somehow they worked together to create this wonderful tunnel. In fact, they had pulled it off decades earlier by building the first supersonic passenger jet called the Concorde. That was a French and English collaboration. So you can see that it's possible, even in the fallen world, for enemy nations that really dislike each other fundamentally on some level to work together and create something spectacular and beautiful. So imagine what that would be like in the ideal world. Anyway, we're not going to get there yet. But the thing is that they created this tunnel. They worked together and they met somewhere in the middle of the English Channel under the water, and these two tunnels converged, and now they have this wonderful tunnel that, you know, you can travel from England to France, France to England under the ocean. So I imagine this idea, this concept of us struggling to build our tunnel back to God, to reconnect with God. And God is working on doing His portion of responsibility. But God, remember, has to allow us to fulfill our portion of responsibility. God cannot interfere with that, because if God were to interfere with that, then God would deny us the opportunity to become co-creators. It's a fundamental principle that we need to recognize, especially as parents. If we want to teach our kids responsibility, we need to allow them to make mistakes and to learn and to grow and to become responsible human beings. We cannot, you know, bless somebody with responsibility. I hereby bless you with responsibility. I hereby bless you with responsibility. It just doesn't work that way. So, and if it did, then the fall never would have happened. The human fall never would have happened. Human beings would have been perfectly aligned with God's will, and we would have become robots. Not free at all, just robots, programmed to do exactly what God wanted to do. So that is not what happened, as we know. So God has responsibility, human beings have responsibility to rebuild that connection. Now, fundamental to our relationship with God is the experiencing of God's love. If we have that experience in our life, it can be like a bedrock for us to grow and to go on and always remember and always have that experience in our life. Because the experience of God, unfortunately, is not always present in our life. If it were, I'm sure we could do no wrong. But it isn't. It comes and goes. And for some of us in this room, including myself, it seems that it's been a very long time since we can honestly say, I've experienced God. And that is our fault, not God's fault. Because what we need to do is we need to recognize how fundamentally important that relationship is. It's pretty much up there with oxygen, to be honest with you. As human beings, we need more than just food and sleep. I mean, we have 4 cats in our house. Don't ask me about it. Anyway, there's 4 cats in our house, and we've been feeding them the same food for 10 years. Now, if you feed human beings the same food for 10 years, they get pretty much, you know, I mean, if I was to feed my own children the same food 2 days in a row, I would get lots of pushback from it. We need creativity, we need love, we need acceptance, we need the sense of like, we need much more than just food. I think we can all agree on that. I remember reading parts of the Lewis and Clark expedition into the unknown territories back then, unknown to white people, of course. But they were stuck in some mountainous area for about 6 months, snowed in. But they had rifles, they had ability to shoot elk and to eat elk. And in the diary of Lewis, I think it was, he's just complaining about elk. Oh, freaking elk! I've got to eat elk again today. It's better than human flesh. I mean, you can compare that to the Donner Party. But if we are just limited in our ability to, you know, get food or experience freedom, we are not satisfied. As human beings, we absolutely need freedom. We need the freedom of expression. And we need to know that we are loved. That is really, really important. So I was telling my kids last night as they prepared to go to summer camp, they've gone. It's just me and Kai in the house now. It's like a bachelor pad. The party starts at 6 tonight. But I was telling them that I remember my mother was she's a devout Catholic. And when we were young, she dragged us all over the place to these famous, places that Catholics like to visit. One of them was in the south of France, and it was a place called Lourdes. Now, from the principle, we know that Mary, mother of Jesus, wasn't all that great as a mother. She's not like, oh, let's follow her example. But according to Catholic faith, she is. She's the mother of the Messiah, so therefore she's got this very, very high status in the Catholic Church. And these young children had a vision of her in this place called Lourdes in the south of France, and they experienced some kind of miracle, and then people have gone there ever since, and it's been declared a holy place. Now, from our founders' words and from research into miracles, we've now understood that miracles happen from within. In other words, your faith is what really creates a miracle. Your belief in something happening is really what heals you as a person, not necessarily some outside force. But here we are in this place in south of France. I'm about 10 years old, and we all have our candles out at night, and everyone's praying and singing, and it creates an amazing atmosphere, no matter where you are in the world. In this particular place, it was very special. So there I had an experience where I could feel or experience what I felt was the love of God, filling me. It was almost like a trickle of warm water going down my central nervous system and spreading out to every appendage of my body, and it was just a wonderful sensation. And I always remember that, and I've always kind of gone back to that during difficult times, knowing that, or remembering that experience as kind of a bedrock to my understanding of what an ideal relationship would be like. In other words, where you feel completely fulfilled, where you are satisfied with your relationship with your Creator, where you feel willing to make great sacrifices yourself in order to do the right thing, or what you perceive as the right thing. So, there's another, I'm going to make a segue to another person in English history, and his name was, well, actually him and his brother, they kind of go together, John and Charles Wesley. Now, John and Charles Wesley were the founders of the Methodist Church, and they were raised, homeschooled in fact, by their mom, and I think there was about 18 children altogether. But John Wesley, on his journey to America, he was a very religious person in external actions, but internally he never really connected with the love of God. And on his journey to America, he was on board the boat with some Mennonites, which are it's a kind of a brand of Christianity from Germany. And during a storm, everyone on the boat is freaking out and thinking this is the last moment of their life, they're all about to drown. Meanwhile, the Mennonites are singing and praying and looking very peaceful and calm. And John Wesley looks at this and goes, I'm missing something. I'm really missing something. And he was seeking for that connection after that. He realized by looking at other people's faith in God that he was missing something in his own relationship with God. So, and it kind of made him envious of that. But he also sought counsel and went to prayer meetings and tried and tried and tried. And then finally, one night, he had promised to go to a meeting in the evening. And he didn't really want to go. Isn't it? Sound familiar? I don't really want to go. Oh, but I said I would. So he drags himself to this meeting, sits down in the pew, the person at the front starts reading some scripture, and then finally, boom, it hits him. It's kind of like he had made a condition over all those years, never knowing how close he was to allowing God's Spirit to enter him. But he had made those conditions. It didn't just come out of the blue, like he's walking down the street, living his sinful life or whatever, and then suddenly, boom, God enters his heart and soul. No, he was devoutly trying and trying and trying for many, many, many years. And then finally, in his 20s, he gets this experience, and then from that point on, he understands his mission. And he goes out and preaches, and the churches reject him. They don't allow him to go into their churches. So then he preaches to the people in the countryside, in the villages, and wherever they will gather. And the rest, of course, you can find out by going to YouTube and watching a video or reading a book about Wesley and his brother. But what I wanted to talk about was the importance of that relationship. And the reason why the Protestants came to America was because they wanted to have the freedom to connect with God. They didn't want to be imposed on by the different views of the people around them. In fact, the Methodists, when they built their churches, they never had ground floor windows. Why do you think that was? Because people would throw rocks through them. So you look at an early Methodist church, it was almost built like a fortress, so that people could have a safe haven where they could preach and where they could worship. And the preacher would be up above the audience, and to get to him you'd have to walk up several stairs. And the reason for that was sometimes mobs came to beat up the preacher. And so the preacher would have like several seconds warning as he watched people running up towards him with sticks and pitchforks to escape through the back. So that was the early Methodist church. And the reason I say that is because those were the circumstances in which the Pilgrim Fathers found themselves in as well. They were persecuted from nation to nation. So they came to America in order to arrive at a place where they could have freedom to worship. And that is fundamental to American history. We should never forget that. So, America, the concept of America, has been under attack ever since. There's the Abel type view of life, the internal, the religious view of life, and then there's the Cain type view of life, where people are trying to build an ideal society, but without God and without any internal guidance. The Cain type view of life is an attempt to restructure society from the outside in. The Cain type view of life believes that the ills of the world are there because the structure of society is all wrong. So the structure needs to be broken down and rearranged by humans in order to allow humans to be happy and free. And we know how that worked. But despite the fact that history has proven the Cain type view of life doesn't work, the Abel type view of life also has its problems. So obviously there needs to be a central view that understands that both are trying to build an ideal world. Both have merits, but both are intrinsically unable to achieve that without a relationship with God. So what I want to encourage us all to do on this preparation for the July 4th celebration in this country is to remember that America is founded on freedom. And what is the purpose of freedom? Why did God want to give human beings freedom instead of building robots that obeyed him exactly? And the purpose of freedom, I believe, is to achieve true love. Without freedom, there cannot be true love. So have a look at your own relationship with God over this extended weekend, today, tomorrow, July 4th, and try to rekindle that spark if you've lost it, or build the fire if you haven't. Because the fire that you have in your heart and soul is your responsibility. And God is there to help. And God is providing us scriptures and all kinds of external stimulations for people around you in your life to help you. But it is important for you to recognize that we have a job to do. We have a tunnel to build. We have a bridge to build. And it's not going to get built by us waiting and looking and wondering who's going to build it for us. We have to build it. And that's what the forefathers of this nation did. They got the ball rolling. They wanted to build a nation under God. They wanted to build a nation where they could freely worship God so that they could practice that relationship and develop their artistic connection with God. It is important at this point for us to remember those who sacrificed their lives for this great nation, for us to appreciate their sacrifice, and to realize that in our own life we have work to do as well. And not only do we have work to do on behalf of our descendants, but we have work to do to build up ourselves. And really that is the only thing we have control over, and that is ourselves and what we can do in our relationship with God. And if we can succeed in that department, we can be an inspiration to other people to do the same thing. So at this time, I just want to wish you all a happy 4th of July and a wonderful weekend. And also, please take this time to reflect, enjoy, and reconnect with your Heavenly Parent. Thank you so much.